terms of the standards and codes that our customers need to comply with, it's related to the stock exchanges that they report to, that they're listed on. So the main ones are here in Australia, the ASX. So our customers need to comply with the ASX listing rules, and those listing rules refer to the JORC code, the Joint Ore Reserve Committee code, which a lot of people are familiar with. So that sets out the minimum reporting standard that our customers have to comply with. In South Africa, in Johannesburg, it's SAMREC. In the US now, it's SK 1300 is the new rule. So our system helps people comply with all those different codes. We can configure it to deliver the right outputs. More than that, some of our customers are multi-listed. So they'll be listed in, say, Johannesburg and the US. So they have to produce two sets of reports, and they are slightly different. There's different requirements. So in our system, they can capture the raw data, the mineral resource and reserve data once, and then configure the reports, the outputs the system provides from the one set of inputs. So there's a great efficiency gain there. So for our resource inventory and reconciliation solution, the main challenges we're seeing at the moment are the big miners that we're working with have so many assets and so many people, so many competent persons that run the process that it gets very complicated. On top of that, you've got increasing requirements from the codes. The main example now is in the US. The SEC SK 1300 is aligning the US with the rest of the world. So that's a very big step up for companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So our solution really offers people a way to manage a whole reporting process, from capturing the data, validating the data, getting various levels of sign-off from the mine, from the competent persons, and then also the executive. So in the resource inventory and reconciliation area, typically companies have been managing the process and the data in one of two ways. They've either built their own database system, typically SQL Server or something like that, or they do it with spreadsheets and email, and maybe a combination of SharePoint as well, or Microsoft Teams. So those solutions get them through the process, but they're quite manually intensive. You have to have a full-time coordinator making sure that all the right data is coming in at the right time, it's at the right quality. Any questions that arise have to go back to the mine or back to the CP and be answered and then brought back into the process. So because that's a very manual run type affair, it can take months. It does take months. It takes 4 to 6 months to get through a reporting cycle. So all that workflow is captured in RCube, which is the main piece of our resource inventory solution. It's automated. The coordinator initiates a workflow in the system, and the system then takes care of gathering the information, gathering the feedback, making sure the right people get the right information at the right time. In the system, the administrator, which it would be a person inside the company, sets up roles and responsibilities. So specific individuals have a role and a responsibility in the system. So the system knows who's a CP for a particular asset, who's the responsible executive, who's the general manager that needs to sign off as part of the process. So that's a key setup piece that underpins those workflows. The system knows who has to do what, and it just manages the interaction and the flow of information. So in terms of the responsibility within a company for the resource inventory, it's typically a technical director or a vice president of resource planning or somebody at that level. So they're kind of just below the C-suite, so to speak. There'll be a geoscientist or a mining engineer. And for them, the key to success is having this process run efficiently, run smoothly, run on time, and deliver high quality outputs. This is a very sensitive piece of public reporting that companies do. If there's errors, there's a real risk of reputational damage. So they want to avoid that at all costs. In some jurisdictions, that has very severe implications. I think our customers come to K2Fly for the resource inventory solution because there's not really any competitor in the market. There's no custom off-the-shelf system that manages this whole process. And I mentioned before, some of our customers, like the big miners, have built their own systems. And the problem with that is then they have to sustain those systems. And the technology changes over time. And we've just seen that in the last few years, particularly with Silverlight technology. That's it's redundant now, but they've got these old systems, these legacy systems. So they have to either reinvent them, put them on a new platform, or go and buy something off the shelf. And if they go to market, we're the only people out there.
And it's like we were saying earlier about the push to the cloud. You've got to have a web-enabled solution to get there. So I think, like Heath says, that's a technology driver in that area as well.
Our customers have seen a couple of benefits. So they've seen that the system manages the process. They've seen that the workflows help them ensure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. They were chasing efficiency gains, and they've seen some efficiency gains, but there's been another benefit that I think they didn't really anticipate, and that is the level of governance over the whole process is now at a much, much higher level compared to where they were before. So yes, they wanted the efficiency, they wanted the governance and the assurance that the process was being run properly, but they've now got, silver star level of performance that they didn't really appreciate that they might be able to get. So in terms of K2Fly integrating the resource inventory and reconciliation solution with other solutions that we offer, there's a couple of things I'd like to mention there. One is, because R-Cubed has been so successful in the last few years, we're now in a position to be able to invest in it and bring it to the same platform as our other technologies. So there's a refresh, so to speak, happening right now. So that's a benefit to our customers. The other thing is with the Model Manager solution, coupling that with R-Cubed now offers our clients an extended level of governance that nobody has today. The resource inventory and reconciliation processes happen after the block model's been created, and there's a disconnect, there's a gap. I'll describe this in the white paper on the website, that there's a weakness in governance between the block models and the reporting. So Mark, maybe you can comment on the plans that we've got there.
Yeah, so as part of the refresh of the R-Cubed product, what we plan to do is link R-Cubed back into Model Manager so that in a data sheet inside R-Cubed, you can link it to an actual version of a particular block model. And then what we'll do is we'll lock that block model so it can never be modified. And then that'll provide complete traceability from the reported figures that were reported to the stock market right through back to the original block model. So the organisations will have this full governance and traceability over the reported figures and the block model associated with them.
And beyond that, the next step is to start automating some of the processes that people do to get information out of block models. The main one being, okay, we've mined for a year, we need to extract the rocks from the model that we've mined and then report what's left. That process is now manually done. But with the Model Manager database system, we see an opportunity to automate those depletion processes. And so now we can bust a paradigm, which is that this reporting has always been an annual process. The model updates are targeting the reporting process, so they're ready, and it's all about an annual snapshot. With this technology, we can get people updating their resource and reserves weekly, monthly, whatever frequency they like. So it now becomes a lot more dynamic and accessible for a company to report whenever they need to. If for a merger or acquisition, for example, it's a lot easier than it would have been in the past.
In the mine geology data management area, a lot of organisations have solutions in place, but they don't have great integration with their mine planning tools, and also they tend to not manage their spatial information as well. With our solution, Maximum Return, it covers the full open pit blockout process, it manages all the spatial data, and it tracks all your logging, your sampling and your assay results, so that geologists are able to use that information to get a better understanding of material behaviour and grade, etc., as it hits the plant and is mined and moves through the process.
In terms of changes and trends going forward, there's two aspects. There's one which is about the codes and the requirements, and there's one about the technology. I'll get Mark to talk about the technology. In terms of the codes, the requirements for people reporting are becoming more and more onerous. There's more detail being requested, and that's because stakeholders want more transparency, and they want to be able to benchmark different companies on an even basis. And that's what's happening in the US. The US has seen that their requirements were much looser and insufficient compared to the rest of the world. So they've now lifted the bar. They've added some of their own little twists in there, and it's now, there's people in the US really concerned about that because they've never had to hit that bar, that standard in terms of reporting and governance of their whole process. So that's a big trend. I think it's going to continue. Mark, you want to talk about this technology aspect?
I think there's two sort of aspects from a technology perspective. One is, I think we'll see a big push towards the cloud. Perhaps private clouds, because the data is very sensitive. And then the second one is, the big miners are definitely embracing automation. And again, as Heath said earlier, things like being able to calculate your depletions automatically, etc. You know, the big miners are trying to engineer people out of the process so that they're as efficient and cost effective as possible. And also using their human resources for what they're best at. So use their brain power rather than, you know, number crunching and data entry type tasks.
One piece I would like to add is about ESG. So, and it gets back to the codes. And I know the Joint Ore Reserve Committee are currently updating the JORC code. They've just run a survey process to get ideas from the community. And the initial feedback I'm getting from the JORC Committee is that there's a lot more focus on ESG factors and making those a lot more transparent in how the mineral resource and ore reserves are actually generated. So that's another piece of the trend. When we say the requirements are increasing, I think it's that ESG piece is really raising its head, and particularly around the environment and the sustainability. You know, recent mining disasters have got investors really focused on those ESG aspects.